Can we start by putting our hands together for Sean, Thomas, and Cameron, the New York City conveners of this great event. I've been asked to tell a little bit about the history of the Accessibility Camp movement to kind of give you some context of the broader community you are now all part of just by being here today. Back in 2009, I was invited by a gentleman named John Croston and Patrick Timoney to Accessibility Camp DC. And I've been working in accessibility for a couple of years, but I was like, what is this accessibility camp business? So I was interested and flew down to Washington, DC. It was a Saturday like today. It was in the Martin Luther King Library in Washington, DC. And there was just a room of about 80, 90 people just milling around, designers, developers, people with disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. The meeting was convened in the morning. There was a big board up, and people were just asked to, first of all, introduce themselves and then put ideas on this board. And I was, in my head, I was like, this is going to be interesting. But then it just, this thing happened. And because this camp movement, camp or unconference, whatever you want to call it, or event, these have been in existence in tech for a while. So these guys, John and others, had been seasoned at doing this, where it had been my first time. So here we are, and then, so we didn't know when we arrived what the schedule was going to be. Like that was the purpose of that particular camp. Some camps do that. They don't tell you what the subject. They say it's accessibility, but you don't know who's going to speak because people can volunteer at the minute, et cetera, et cetera. So I was like, yeah. So, but at the end, when it was all done, I was totally taken by it. I was like, this is really interesting. It's mildly chaotic and informal like me. And there was so much learning happening. People with disabilities were demonstrating equipment to designers and developers who'd never seen it before. All kinds of just synergies were happening. And it was just a great thing. So I left that event going, okay, that's interesting. And then fast forward to 2010, the winter of 2010, and I was on Twitter. By the way, do we have I guess our hashtag today is ALM NYC?
Yes.
Cool. So I'll throw that in there. So 2010, I'm on Twitter, and someone in Boston went, oh, it would be really cool if there was a conference similar to the big technology and people with disabilities conference in California, but out here in the Northeast. And so, of course, I piped in, and I was like, oh, you folks should consider doing an unconference or a camp in Boston. And so before I knew it, I was on the phone with like 3 or 4 people, only one of whom I knew, and we were fast organizing this accessibility unconference in Boston in 2010, which just this year celebrated its 6th anniversary. And then now before that one actually happened, I've always been told to make sure I don't forget this. The next one actually happened in Canada, where I'm from originally, in a little city called Guelph, which is near Toronto, in an actual pub. So it was attached to an actual accessibility conference, but then they said, hey, let's all get together and meet in a pub and talk, like make it an informal unconference kind of thing. And it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. But then, so fast forward, Boston then came on into line, and then since then, we've had events in places like Seattle and Los Angeles and Missoula, Montana, and the San Francisco Bay Area, Toronto, Montreal, and Tokyo. And of course, when you start listing things, you run the risk of forgetting something, right? But then our most recent joinee to the party was Sydney, Australia, this July. And now New York. This is great. The New York event actually, we were trying to see about setting one of these up back as early as, I think Thomas was telling me on the internet, he was Googling and saw some stuff, some noise I was making in 2012 about bringing a camp here. So here we are. And that's great. So again, applause to all of you for getting this all set up. And just to give you all a sense as to the camp family, how it is grown and such, we've got people even here today, not to put people on the spot, but the gentleman holding my mic is from Austin, Texas, and we've got a friend of mine from Montreal, and I know we've got some folks, at least one person from upstate New York and some other places from Michigan, yes. Dylan, and some other folks. So it's a large family. So we welcome all of you to this event. So similar to where I'm from, the San Francisco Bay Area, New York City is just a hotbed of startups, tech startups, and all kinds of things. As you all know, people are just wanting to make the next best thing, right? The next best Facebook, the next best Google, whatever. But everyone is, and so this is. The Silicon East is here in New York. So the challenge, if you choose to accept it, each one of us, whether it's digital accessibility or museum accessibility or whatnot, is to spread yourselves out. Use the meetup group, the NYC meetup group as your base of operations, but start spreading out. There are so many meetups on so many different things and so many other events happening. So it's so important for us to kind of be visible in these other venues so that we can cause these conversations on accessibility to happen everywhere. So I invite everyone, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. You can just start looking at whatever your interest is and seeing if there's a meetup group here, and then just start meeting people and just bring up the topic of accessibility, and you'll be pleasantly surprised, I think, at what you're going to find. I know certainly, as you can imagine, in the Bay Area, there's so many things happening, hackathons and all kinds of stuff. I was so honored to have been invited to judge, and it was a mainstream hackathon. It was Civic Hacking for America, I believe it's called. And it was just nice to be part of that. So the opportunities are there. People in the main, though, I can tell you, at least on the tech side, everyone is interested, but they just don't know who to speak to or where to go. So make yourselves available. I'd love to read more about, so-and-so is talking about accessibility at this mainstream event in New York. It gives me another excuse to come visit. But just think about that, all of you. But the other thing I want you all to think about as you're here is the purpose of the camp, at least the camps that I've been involved with directly, and I know Sean Thomas and Cameron share this with me, is it's meant to be informal here. No one here is expected to be an expert. You want to meet people. So if I were you, and I'd say this even if I wasn't working at LinkedIn, I want everyone to connect with one or two people that you don't know in this room. Go up to them and say hello. Find out what they're doing. They could be doing something totally different from what you know and what you do, and that's the point. So in closing, let me say this: accessibility, whether it's digital, again, museum accessibility, physical accessibility, all of that stuff. This field today is an amazing place to be in. We are all, whether we're working in it directly or whether we care about it or have a family member or friend who's impacted by it, we all know what this is about. And for those of us who work in the field, there are very few fields out there where we know when we go home at night, we've impacted directly the lives of folk with different disabilities and impairments. So it's an amazing place to be. There's lots of work in the field. I know Apple just is trumpeting now. They've got 18 positions in accessibility right now out in the Valley. Of course, it would be great to see more positions out here in the New York City area. Hopefully that will come in time. But there's certainly work out there. There's certainly things to do. And it's such a diverse sector. It's demonstrated by the schedule we have here today. We have talks on digital accessibility, but we also have a talk on museum accessibility. We have Svetlana, who's going to be educating us more on the user experience of folk who are deaf, which I have to tell you, even for myself, who's worked in accessibility for about 10 years, I know a little bit about, but I know Svetlana is going to educate us a lot about that. We've got talks on usability, and we're going to hear from someone who writes a food blog and talks about accessibility of restaurants and such. So there's such diversity, and it makes sense that it's so diverse in a city as great as New York. So I've gone over my 10 minutes. I just want to say thank you all for coming out on a Saturday to do this. This gives us all who work in the camps, who volunteer to do these camps, a lot of energy to want to do more of these. So I'm expecting to be back here next year for another Accessibility Camp New York.
Yes.
Right? And everyone have yourself a great day. I look forward to having a chance to meet many of you, or all of you, at lunch. Thank you.